All right, let's dive into the long, really complex story of economic pressure between two of the world's biggest democracies, the United States and India. It's a fascinating story about how the tactics of pressure keep changing, but the response has been, well, surprisingly consistent. So let's get right into it.
Okay, so first things first, let's make sure we're all on the same page. We're going to be talking a lot about economic coercion. What is that? Simply put, it's when a country uses its economic power, things like sanctions or tariffs, to try and force another country to change its mind on big strategic issues. This idea right here, it's the absolute key to understanding the push and pull between the US and India that's been going on for decades.
So, where does this whole story really kick off? For that, we've got to rewind the clock. We're going back to the 20th century, to what you could call the Sanctions era. And this wasn't just a one-off event. It was a long, sustained period of American pressure. And if you look at this timeline, a pattern emerges almost immediately. Back in 1974, India conducts its first nuclear test. What happens? Bam! US sanctions. Fast forward to 1998, India tests again, and this time the US doubles down with even tougher sanctions. It's this clear dynamic of action and reaction that really defined the relationship for years.
So what was actually in the American playbook back then? Well, it was broad, and it was institutional. It wasn't just about, slapping on some direct sanctions. Nope, it was a much bigger play. We're talking about cutting off developmental aid and also using American influence at places like the World Bank to try and choke off financial support to India. It was a real full-court press.
But here's the thing. All that pressure, it didn't quite work the way the US might have hoped. India turned out to be remarkably resilient. They managed to navigate the whole crisis by attracting new investment from elsewhere and by playing a very, very smart diplomatic game. And in the end, that strategy totally paid off. By 2001, the sanctions were lifted.
But after the turn of the century, the whole dynamic shifted, and it shifted dramatically. That old playbook of using these big, broad sanctions, well, it was about to be tossed out for something way more direct.
And there it is, a simple sentence, but wow, does it signal a huge change in strategy. This was the real turning point. The tools of coercion were about to get sharper, more targeted, and honestly, a lot more disruptive.
And here is the stark reality of that change: 50%. A massive 50% tariff on most Indian exports, proposed for 2025. I mean, we're not talking about a subtle squeeze here. This was a direct economic punch aimed right at billions of dollars in trade. A number like that is absolutely designed to get your attention. So why such an aggressive move? Well, the official reasons given were all about India's independent foreign policy choices, specifically things like its continued energy trade with Russia and its important role in the BRICS group of nations. Basically, the US was taking aim at the very heart of India's strategic independence. So this modern toolkit is a whole different beast. It's way more diverse and surgical. You've got these huge tariffs, then you have sanctions that don't hit the entire country, but instead go after very specific companies for doing business with a country like Iran. And then there's a third lever, restricting visas for students and professionals. It's a multi-pronged attack.
Okay, so with the US tactics evolving so much, the massive question becomes, how did India's response change? Or did it change at all? And this gets us right to the core of India's entire foreign policy, this idea they call strategic autonomy.
This quote from our source material really just says it all. It doesn't matter what was thrown at them, whether it was the sanctions of the 90s or the tariffs of the 2020s, the one consistent theme in India's response has been a laser focus on its own national interest. And when you lay it out side by side like this, the evolution is just so stark. The old playbook was all about these broad institutional tools, hitting the whole system with sanctions and aid cuts. The new playbook, it's sharp, it's targeted, punitive tariffs, going after specific companies, even using visa restrictions. This shift is really the core of the whole story. And this right here, this is the crucial insight. While the American tactics got a complete makeover, India's core response really didn't. Its fundamental strategy, one of resilience, built on smart diplomacy and a wide range of partnerships, it held firm. So the methods of pressure changed, but India's strategy for enduring that pressure, it stayed the same. So what does this all add up to? Well, it reveals this enduring pattern in how countries deal with each other. It's like a decades-long dance of pressure and pushback between two of the world's most important powers. So let's boil this whole history down to the 4 key takeaways. First,
U.S. economic pressure on India is not new, not by a long shot. It's a recurring theme. Second, the tools themselves have completely evolved, from those big, broad sanctions to these sharp, targeted tariffs. Third, India's response has been incredibly consistent, always prioritizing its own path. And finally, that resilience isn't an accident, it's a deliberate strategy built on having a lot of different alliances and partners.
And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. In a world where global alliances are shifting all the time, what does this whole history of pressure and resilience tell us about the future? Can nations still successfully chart their own course? And what will the economic playbook of coercion look like tomorrow?